We had a bit of fun last week. I think some Black Sabbath, some riffs, some licks. So I think what we need this week is some intense and grueling hard work. So I've got a bit of theory for you today, some fretboard knowledge, some drills, and I've got a series of triad-based exercises for you to try. Some of them are easy-ish, some of them a bit more challenging, and I'll try and make this as interesting as possible. I'm just not going to promise it's going to be anything approaching fun. Now, I realise that I'm always banging on about triads in my videos, but I'm not going to apologise for that. And for me, they are one of the most important ways of understanding the guitar, understanding the fretboard, and it's something I'm using all the time, irrespective of what style I happen to be playing. I'll be using them for rhythm guitar, lead guitar, for coming up with interesting guitar parts, and I think it's one of those things you can never really work on too much, and I think some people believe it's kind of this beginner's thing, and you kind of learn a couple of shapes and then you tick it off the list and then you move on to more advanced stuff, whatever that might be. But for me, it's something that you always need to be working on, and you can be deepening your understanding of this stuff. And you might think you know this stuff, but how well do you really know it? Do you know all the shapes all over the fretboard, different keys? Can you access this stuff right away in a real playing situation? I have done quite a few other triad videos, and I will try and put together a little playlist of all of those videos, so if you've not already seen them, you can check them out. And today I'm going to be taking a slightly different approach, and I'm going to be talking about diatonic triads, and that's just a fancy way of saying triads that belong together in the same key. It's a really important thing to understand, and I'm going to be pitching things today at a kind of intermediate level. I think if some of these concepts are completely new to you, you might want to check out some of those earlier videos, and of course there's going to be a tab up on my Patreon page for those of you who are interested. So let's get started. Starting with a bit of theory then, and I'm just going to be talking about major keys in this video. I might save minor keys for a future video, but the big theoretical concept to grasp here is this idea that in every major key you've got 7 different basic triad shapes available, and you're building a triad off of each note in the major scale. You've got this series of 7 different chords. Triads are just little 3-note chords, and they're all going to sound good together because they're all built just from notes in the key. So let's just take a look at how that might work on the fretboard. Let's do this in the key of C major. It's nice and simple, no sharps and flats involved, and you could just visualize a C major scale along the length of the 3rd string. So if we start with this C note here, 5th fret on the 3rd string, we've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B and C. So that's a simple 1-string C major scale, and we're going to build our 3-note triad shapes off of those notes in the scale. And the way that you do this is you build these shapes in thirds. You stack thirds. It's kind of easy to see if you're looking at the musical notation. You can see that the notes kind of building up, going from line to line or space to space on a musical score. But it basically means we're just taking every other note in the scale from our starting note. So if we start on our C note here, we take every other note in the C major scale from here. We've got C, D, E we're going to take, and then C, D, E, F, G would be the next note. So it's the 1st, the 3rd and the 5th notes from our starting note, and that gives us a C major triad shape. So we've got this shape here, 5th fret, 5th fret and 3rd fret. You can play it like that with fingers 2, 3 and 1, or perhaps with 3, 4 and 1, like that. Doesn't particularly matter. That's our first shape, and then we can just continue that process, building triads off of each of the notes in this scale. So the next note in the scale is a D, and if we take every other note in the C major scale from the D note, you end up with a D, an F, and then an A. You can hear that that's a minor sound. This is a minor triad shape, and on the fretboard this is fret 7, 6 and 5, so quite a comfortable shape, just falls very naturally under the fingers. And then we can just continue that process. So the 3rd note in the scale, E, and we can build the triad shape in thirds, E, G and B. This is another minor shape. This is an E minor triad, and continuing the process, we've got F, F, A and C, that's F major. Then we've got G, B, D, G major, A, C, E, that's A minor, and then we've got just kind of the weird ones. So we've got B, D, and F. You can hear that's got a slightly more unusual sound, I suppose. This is a B diminished triad, and then we're back home again to C major. So those are our 7 C major triads. And if you don't already know this stuff, it's really important you memorize this sequence of triads. The notes and the triad names will be different in each key, but the actual pattern of triads is going to be exactly the same. They're always going to occur in this kind of order in any major key. So things to notice here, we've got 3 different qualities of triad. We've got major, we've got minor, and we've got diminished. So we've actually got 3 major triads. We've got C major, F and G. We've got 3 minor triads, that's D, E and A minor. We've just got one of these diminished triads there, and you certainly want to memorize the order in which these triads occur. We've got major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So if you start with major, then it comes in pairs. You've got 2 minors, 2 majors, then you've got another minor, and then the diminished triad comes right at the end. And a very useful thing, a very common thing to do is to number these triads as well. So you would talk about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 triads. Often you'll write those down in Roman numerals, and the convention often is to have uppercase Roman numerals for the major triads, the 1, 4 and the 5, and then lowercase Roman numerals for the minor triads, and I think for the diminished triads as well, so the 2, 3, 6 and 7. So if you don't already know that, just learn it. It's super important. It's not that hard to do, and it really is a kind of core piece of music theory and fretboard knowledge. And the first exercise I'd recommend you do is just to play that simple diatonic triad scale up and down the fretboard on that top string set. So on strings 1, 2 and 3, just get that under your fingers. Make sure you can play it smoothly up and down like this. Just make sure you can play that smoothly up and down the fretboard. You might actually like to name those triads out loud as well, and you certainly want to be aware of where the root notes are. So in this particular triad scale, it's quite straightforward. You've got the root note as the lowest note in each of these shapes, so try and really visualize that clearly on the fretboard. Another thing that you might like to try is mixing up the order of these shapes a little bit, and you can just kind of mess around randomly with that, or you can put them into a kind of sequence. So an exercise that I sometimes do is just skipping thirds, so going from the first shape to the third shape, second to the fourth shape, and so on up the fretboard. So that would sound like this. So that simple chord scale, triad scale, is our starting point, but there are absolutely loads of ways you can lay out this information on the guitar, and perhaps the next step would be to find those same chords on the other string set. So if we're playing these triads on 3 adjacent strings within the same octave, you've actually got 4 possible groups of 3 strings. So you've got strings 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6. So if we go to the next string set over, so strings 2, 3 and 4, and just find those same chord shapes. We're going to start with our 1 chord, our C major chord. So we've got a C note here at the 10th fret on the 4th string, and then you can find C, E and G. There's our 1 chord, there's our C major chord. We can do exactly the same thing, just we've got our C major scale along the length of the 4th string this time, and we're just going to find those triad qualities. You will notice that the actual shapes will change, thanks to the kind of eccentric way that the guitar is tuned. You'll notice that the major shape with the root on the 4th string, we've got frets 10, 9 and 8. That's a C major shape. It actually looks like the minor shape that we were playing on the top 3 strings, but now thanks to the way the guitar is tuned, this is now a major shape. So just one of those things you kind of have to put up with if you're playing the guitar in standard tuning. So that's our major shape. Then just the same process really. So we've got 12, 10, 10, that's D minor, and we're just going to take that up the fretboard. So we've got C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, and at some point you're going to run out of room on the fretboard, or it's going to become a little bit uncomfortable. So what I tend to do is just to come down 12 frets and continue the scale down here. So I could play my A minor down here, and then we've got B diminished, and then C major. So that's our triad scale on string set 2, 3 and 4. So there are various ways you could play that. I'm just starting here with the lowest available root position C major triad shape. Some people like to start with the lowest available shape, even if it's not the 1 chord. So you could start down here with an E minor shape, for example, and play it like that. You could continue right up to the highest possible shape on the fretboard before coming back down to this end of the fretboard. So up to you exactly how you do it, but you certainly want to be able to find those 7 shapes on this string set. And I'm just going to speed through the same process on the other 2 string sets. So strings 3, 4 and 5. Again, the shapes are going to be slightly different, and I will have all of this stuff written out in tab for those of you who need it, but I strongly urge you to work this stuff out yourself. So find your C major scale and then find the other notes that you need for those triad shapes. You really get a lot out of working on this stuff yourself, and you're understanding the logic of the fretboard, the kind of twisted logic of the guitar fretboard. So on this string set with the root on the 5th string, the shapes would look like this. Different shapes, exactly the same triad qualities though. They're major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then back to major again. And then we can come on to the final string set. So our first shape would be here, the root notes. It's frets 8, 7 and 5. Our shapes there. One good thing is that the actual finger shapes are the same on string sets 3, 4, 5 and 4, 5 and 6, because those strings are tuned in fourths. You don't actually need to learn any more shapes when you're going over onto that final string set. Let's continue, and we're only really just getting started with this stuff. So what about inversions? So far all of these triad shapes that we've been using have been in what is known as root position. So the root note is the lowest of the 3 notes, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually change the order of those notes to get a couple of different inversions. So let's start with first inversion. That is where the 3rd is the lowest note in the shape. So if we've got a C major triad, for example, you've got C, E, G, root, 3rd and 5th. What if we take that E, which is the 3rd, make that the lowest note, and you could play that a little bit higher on the fretboard. You'd have E, G and C. This is what's known as a first inversion C major triad. So it's this shape here. I tend to play that with my 2nd finger and then 1st finger, just barring the top 2 strings. With all of these shapes, the root note is all important. So with this inverted shape, this first inversion shape, the root note is on the top string. It's the highest note in these shapes, and that's going to be my main reference point when I'm trying to find these chords and move them around and play in different keys. But what we can do for now is just to play our same triad scale exercise with these first inversion shapes. So the actual shapes are going to be different, but the theory is the same. These triads are still going to follow the same order. So it's going to start with major, minor, minor, major, and so on through the keys. So we'll start with this first inversion C major shape. That's our 1 chord, and then our minor shape now looks like this. Our first inversion minor shape, we've got F, A and D. This is a D minor. Again, the root note is on the top string, so that's our minor shape. Then we've got E minor, F, G, and I'll just skip down an octave here. A minor is the 6th chord, and then the diminished shape will look like that. We've got frets 7, 6 and 7, and then we're back home to the 1 again. So that's our first inversion triad scale. We could do the same thing with the remaining inversion. So again, if we flip the order of notes in our basic triad, so G as the lowest note, and we can have G, C and E. This is our second inversion shape. So the 5th, in the case of a C major triad, a G note is the lowest note. So you could play it up here. You've got 12, 13 and 12. And here the root note is in the middle. It's on the 2nd string here. So that's going to be my main reference point. I can play my scale using these shapes. Now I'm just going to start down at this end of the neck just to give myself a bit more room. So we can start here with our C major shape. Now the minor shape looks like this. This will be familiar to you from the open position D minor chord, and then we've got E minor, F, G, A minor. Our diminished shape now looks like this, frets 10, 12, 10, and then we're back home again. So that's another of these triad scales. It's really important to get that under your fingers, get that flowing smoothly up and down the fretboard. And of course you can take this stuff onto the other string sets, so strings 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, and you can play those same first and second inversion scales. You can try it in all 12 different keys, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed with this. There is a ton of information here. I am trying to cram quite a lot into this video, and it is almost a lifetime's work to really get familiar with all of this information. So just take your time with it. Just you start with one thing. Just learn maybe the first triad scale really well, then move on to the next thing. It does become a little bit easier. The more experienced you become, you get faster at absorbing this information. You start to make connections between these different concepts more quickly. So far the approach has been to play horizontally, so we've been sticking to the train tracks, if you like, of these string sets and playing all the way up and down the fretboard, and I think that's a good place to start. It's the most logical way to see how this kind of thing works, but often in practical playing situations you're going to want to find this stuff in the same area of the fretboard. So let's give that a try now, and this is a useful exercise, I think. So we're going to return to the top string set, so strings 1, 2 and 3, and let's start with our C major root position shape. But what we're going to do is we're going to mix up some different inversions, and as you'll see, that will enable us to play the entire scale sticking within this zone of the fretboard, so within a kind of 4 or 5 fret area. So we can start with C major here and D minor as before, but rather than continuing up here and playing E minor in a root position shape, we could play E minor here as a first inversion shape, and then F, and then we could switch again to this shape here. This is a second inversion G major and A minor, and then switch one more time back to root position. We've got B diminished and back to C. So you can see by playing just two shapes from each inversion, you can actually play the entire scale staying within this zone of the neck. So So that makes you think a little bit more. Important to really be aware of where those root notes are. That's my reference point here. So I'm just visualizing those root notes lighting up on the fretboard, and then I'm able to find the triad shapes that surround those root notes. So that's one way of doing it. We could do that in a couple of different areas on the same string set. So if we come up to here, we could do very similar exercise, but starting with this C major shape in the first inversion. Again, just playing two shapes with every inversion before switching, so we're able to stay in this zone of the fretboard. So that would look like this. And we could do that one more time, starting from this shape here, so second inversion C major, and staying in this zone of the fretboard. So it's a really great exercise, this one, quite challenging, but it does give you a really smooth sound. And once again, if you're feeling up to it, you can take that onto the other string sets, take it to some other keys as well. A further great exercise would be to do a similar thing, but actually take the shapes across the different string sets. So if we start down on the lowest string set with this root position C major shape, I'm just going to play two shapes on each string set before switching. So C major, D minor, then over to the next string set, E minor and F. Over again we got G and A minor, and then over again B diminished and C. So that's another little triad scale exercise. And why not do that with the other inversions as well? So you could start here, C major, first inversion, and take that across the fretboard. And you could do another version of that exercise starting with the second inversion shape. So that would be this shape here, so C major, second inversion. So you get the idea. I do realise I'm rushing through some of this stuff quite quickly, but I just wanted to illustrate some of the possibilities here, and this is not something that you're going to be able to do immediately, particularly if this is new information. So this might be one of those videos you can kind of bookmark it and come back to it over the course of quite a long period of time and get this stuff together quite gradually. So a load of triad based exercises. They're not the most thrilling thing to be working on, I grant you, but it is really good for you. You can do some really good stuff with it. And I might just briefly talk about applications of this stuff. This could really be another video or another series of videos, but maybe just talk about what I did at the very start of this video. I just did a little improvisation over a C major chord progression. So all the chords in that chord progression were from the key of C major. I think all of the chords were in there apart from the diminished chord. And then I just came up with a little rhythm guitar part and then a little, I suppose, a kind of solo of sorts, using triads for my main sort of basis of note selection. So the chord progression I was playing over there was actually started on the 2 chord. So it was D minor going to C, so 2 to 1, then it was F to C, so 4 to 1, and then we had F, E minor, so 4 to 3, and then to G, which is the 5 chords. So reasonably interesting chord progression, but all completely diatonic. And then I came out with a little kind of rhythmic guitar figure, just playing some hits on some triad shapes. So this kind of 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So playing on the 2 and then the and of 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It's going from D minor to C to F to C. You can just experiment. Now you have all this triad knowledge, you can actually do that in various different places on the guitar. So you can choose the kind of the register that you're playing in to fit whatever else is going on in the song or whatever context it is you're playing in. So I chose to play it around here, but you could play it lower down the neck, you could play it higher up the neck, you could play it on other string sets. And then for my solo, or whatever you want to call it, I was just literally grabbing notes from those same triad shapes and trying to make it into some kind of musically interesting statement. And that's really the trick here. You don't want it to sound like a triad exercise, and it might well sound like that to start with, but really the things that are going to help you here are thinking about rhythm and expression. So playing these triad shapes in interesting rhythms, adding a bit of vibrato, some bending, maybe adding in some extra notes here and there, and then connecting between these triad shapes smoothly to try and come up with some cool melodies. So really I was just grabbing these triad shapes, so D minor to C, just trying to connect smoothly to F, to C, then F, to E, then to G. So the more you've worked on this triad stuff, the more easily you'll find that those notes are right under your fingers and you can grab them and do something interesting with them. There we are. I hope that wasn't too painful, and as I hope that last example showed, there are actually lots of great musical ways that you can apply these concepts, so it's well worth spending a bit of time practicing this stuff. Now tomorrow I'm going to do a marathon tabbing session. I'm going to write out all of the examples in this video. If you'd like to get your hands on those tabs, they'll be on my Patreon page, pay what you like. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.